Hi, my name's Diantha. I came back home after the army, thinking I'd find peace, maybe even a few warm smiles. Instead, I found silence and red marks on my grandmother's arms. They said it was just her skin, said I was overreacting. But then I found the video, the bruises, the forged documents, the lies. My mother and sister didn't just try to erase me, they tried to erase her. And for years, they almost got away with it. Why would a family go this far to bury the truth, and why did no one else stop them? The wind picked up just as I turned onto the street where I grew up. Wichita Falls hadn't changed much since I left for the army. Dusty yards, faded fences, porches with tired rocking chairs. But the house at the end of the block, the one that used to feel like the center of my universe, looked smaller now, not physically, but emotionally, like it had shrunk in spirit. Or maybe I had grown. 8 years of deployments and barracks and sandstorms had stretched me in ways I couldn't undo. The porch light flickered when I stepped onto the front steps. That bulb always flickered. Dad said it gave the house character. He'd been gone for 5 years now. I reached out and knocked. Not loud, 3 firm taps. Enough to be heard, but not enough to feel like I was invading. Still, it took too long for someone to open the door. Valora opened it. My mother. Her gray hair was pulled tight in a bun, not a strand out of place. No hug, no "welcome home, baby," just a glance up and down, then a tight-lipped, "You should have called first." I offered a weak smile. "Didn't want to give anyone a reason to disappear." She stepped aside. I entered. The living room looked cleaner, colder. The big family photo that used to hang over the mantel was gone. The old recliner where Grandma used to sit had been replaced by a stiff leather chair. No scent of pot roast or cinnamon, just disinfectant, like someone was trying too hard to keep something sterile. Or hidden. "She's upstairs," Valora said, voice flat. "Sleeping." I figured, long day? Valora shrugged and disappeared into the kitchen. I stood there a minute longer, taking in the unfamiliar arrangement of familiar things. They hadn't waited for me. That was clear. Dinner came fast. Isolde, my sister, was already seated when I entered the dining room. She looked up briefly, just long enough to register me. "You're back," she said, like she was stating the weather. "Looks like it." Valora brought out a tray, grilled chicken, roasted carrots, and some boxed wine in a jug. No seat had been set for me. I pulled out a chair. "Thought you'd be tired after all that travel," Isolde said, slicing into her meat. "Didn't expect you at the table." "I'm not tired," I replied. "I'm home." Neither of them responded. As they talked about real estate markets, someone's baby shower, their weekend plans, I sat in silence. No one asked about my time in the army, about what it was like to come home. I was a shadow in their spotlight. At one point, Isolde chuckled at something Valora said and added, "Well, if you'd told me 10 years ago this house would finally have some peace in it, I wouldn't have believed you." They both laughed. I didn't. After dinner, they left the dishes in the sink and retreated to the living room. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the half-eaten dinner plate in front of me. Then I turned, walked upstairs. The hallway creaked under my boots. That hadn't changed. Grandma's door was closed. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the doorknob. Then I opened it slowly. The room smelled faintly of lavender and something else, something metallic and wrong. The curtains were drawn. She lay on the bed, her face pale, eyes closed. Her breathing was shallow but even. I stepped closer. Her hands rested above the blanket. That's when I saw them. Angry red marks, some like welts, others like bruises, lining her forearms. I reached down, lifted the blanket gently. Her skin, so thin, so fragile, was covered in them. She stirred. "Grandma?" I whispered, my voice caught between fear and fury. Her eyelids fluttered. Then, almost too soft to hear, she mumbled, "Don't inject me again." I froze. A million thoughts fought to surface. Who did this? Why? How long has this been happening? But I said nothing. I couldn't. Instead, I sat beside her, watching her sleep, replaying that whisper over and over in my head like a song I never wanted to hear again. Was she sedated? Was this neglect? Abuse? I didn't know, but I knew it wasn't okay. I didn't storm downstairs. I didn't accuse anyone. Not yet. I needed to understand what I was walking into. This wasn't the battlefield I trained for, but it sure as hell felt like a war. I pulled the blanket back over her arms and leaned in to kiss her forehead. Her skin was cool, dry. My lips trembled. As I turned to leave, her voice, small, raspy, broke the silence again. "You came back. Finally." I stopped. I didn't cry. But something inside me cracked. My feet didn't move. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat. "You came back. Finally," she had said. The fragility in Grandma's voice the night before had a weight to it that lingered long after I returned to my room. Morning crept in through the slats of the blinds, casting long shadows across the faded carpet. I hadn't slept. Not really. I laid on top of the covers, arms crossed over my chest, listening to every creak of the house, the familiar rhythm of the floorboards under Valora's heels, the kettle screaming from downstairs, the cabinet doors opening and closing, all so ordinary, but none of it felt safe anymore. I got up, ran cold water over my face in the bathroom down the hall, and stared at myself in the mirror. The skin under my eyes sagged a little more than it used to. My jaw looked clenched even when I wasn't thinking about it. I had the face of a woman who'd seen deserts, death, and years of commands shouted across foreign fields, and yet, it was this house that had hardened me. Downstairs, Valora was wiping down the kitchen counter when I walked in. She didn't look up. "Morning," I said. She hummed, not quite a response. "I was with Grandma last night," I continued. "I noticed she has bruises, all over her arms. I was wondering—" "She's old, Diantha." Valora finally turned, eyes blank. "Her skin bruises if you look at it the wrong way. That's not what I— You've been gone a long time. You wouldn't know how she's been." There it was. The first slap, emotional, this time. "I'm just saying it didn't look like age. It looked like—" Valora straightened. "Like what? Like abuse?" Her voice stayed low, too measured to be anything but calculated. "Are you accusing your own mother of something now?" From behind me, I heard Isolda's voice drip like honey laced with vinegar. "You're reading too much into everything. Same as always? Remember when you thought Dad was cheating with that nurse because he didn't answer one phone call? That wasn't—" I stopped myself. Arguing was pointless. Truth didn't stand a chance here unless it was dressed up in witnesses and paperwork. "We have a routine," Valora said, pouring hot water into a mug. "Grandma's looked after. You showing up now with wild accusations, it's disruptive." She murmured something about injections. That could have meant anything. She mumbles nonsense half the day. Half the time she doesn't even know your name, let alone what day it is. My blood simmered. She knew who I was last night. "Sure she did," Isolde snorted. "You've always needed everything to be dramatic." That's when the doorbell rang. A distraction I didn't ask for but welcomed. Valora composed herself in an instant. She moved toward the door, patting her hair, softening her face. When she opened it, the shift was so stark I almost laughed, until I remembered this wasn't funny. "Sharon, Marlene, good morning." Valora's voice lifted into that sing-song tone I hadn't heard since the last church picnic. Two women stepped inside, followed by a third I didn't recognize. They carried a tray of pastries and a warm smell of vanilla. "We brought cinnamon rolls," one of them beamed. "Thought we'd check in on you and Ruthie." "She's resting, but I was just about to bring her out to enjoy the morning sun." Valora looked at me over her shoulder. "Diantha, would you help wheel her out to the porch?" It wasn't a request. I did as I was told, rolling Grandma's chair down the hallway. She stirred slightly when I adjusted her blanket. Her eyes opened, met mine for a split second, then closed again. Valora greeted our guests with sweet tea and carefully folded napkins. "She loves mornings like this. She's happiest when the sun's out." "She always had a green thumb," Sharon said. "Her begonias used to win ribbons at the fair." "She doesn't garden anymore," Valora answered, brushing a hair off Grandma's forehead. "Diantha worries too much about everything. Always has." I stood beside Grandma in silence, a prop in Valora's stage play. They chatted about church events, neighborhood news, and the weather. No one asked me anything. When I tried to speak, it was either interrupted or redirected. I was a guest in my own bloodline. Eventually, I asked, "Has anyone else noticed how tired she seems? She's been very groggy since I got here." Marlene glanced at me, then shrugged. "Well, she's what, 87 now? That's just part of it." Isolde chuckled, sipping her tea. "Some people think a few bruises mean the sky is falling. Must be exhausting." They laughed. I didn't. After the women left, Valora carried the empty tray to the kitchen. I followed, quietly gathering the used cups. The room felt colder now, despite the sunlight streaming through the windows. As I rinsed the mugs, I heard them before I saw them. Valora and Isolde in the hallway, just around the corner. "She's not staying long, right?" Valora's voice was barely above a whisper. Isolde's answer was colder than I expected. "She can't." I stood motionless for a moment, the water still running over my hands. I turned it off, dried the mugs slowly, and set them back on the rack. In that moment, I made a decision. Not one I shouted aloud, not one I wrote down, but one that rooted itself deep. I would not be pushed out of this house. I wouldn't react on instinct. I'd wait, watch, document. They wanted me gone. But I wasn't the same girl they remembered. Needy, over-emotional, always second-guessing herself. The army taught me discipline. Afghanistan taught me patience. And this house was about to teach them what happens when you push someone too far. I stood there longer than I should have, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, the other still wrapped around that warm ceramic mug. The conversation I'd just overheard between Valora and Isolde played in a relentless loop. "She can't stay." It wasn't a discussion. It was a decision already made, just not by me. I rinsed the mug under lukewarm water, dried it slowly with a towel, then returned it to the hook beside the sink like I hadn't heard a damn thing. The kitchen clock ticked quietly behind me, 9:23 p.m. I made my way upstairs, back into my childhood room, the one that used to be mine, but now felt like it belonged to someone else entirely. They'd painted the walls a sterile beige at some point, replaced my books with scented candles and faux plants. Even the closet was half empty, like someone had been preparing to reclaim the space. I sat on the edge of the bed, took a breath, and opened my laptop. The screen flickered to life. I typed in the old password, the same one Grandma had helped me set up years ago, Ruthie202. The screen loaded my old inbox, hundreds of unread emails. I scrolled down, slower, then faster, as something gnawed at the back of my brain. Video call requests, dozens of them. From Grandma, missed, unanswered. Dates spanning back at least 5 years. Almost all of them during my time overseas. All flagged, unseen. A lump formed in my throat. I clicked one. The loading wheel spun, then gave me an error. Blocked contact. Blocked. My heart dropped. I pulled up the settings, checked the block list. There she was, her name, her email. I hadn't done it. I never would have. I knew that as sure as I knew how many stripes were on the flag. I clicked into the system logs, something I'd learned to do back when we had to track hacks during deployment. It didn't take long. The IP address that had logged in and changed the settings matched the Wi-Fi here, this house. Valora had blocked my grandmother from reaching me. Not just neglected to keep me in the loop, she'd made sure Grandma couldn't. I sat frozen. Grandma hadn't stopped trying. She had tried. She had thought I abandoned her. And it was my own mother who made sure it looked that way. I clenched my jaw and shut the laptop gently. My hands shook, but my head was clear. I needed air, but not from outside. I needed clarity, truth. I walked quietly to the hallway closet. The creaky third stair still made its noise, so I stepped over it. Valora's medicine cabinet was in the small upstairs bathroom across from her room. The door was cracked open. I checked the hallway. Quiet. Isolde's bedroom door was closed, light off. I turned on my phone's flashlight, careful to keep the beam low. Inside the cabinet, I found rows of labeled bottles. At first glance, it looked organized, professional, but something felt off. I picked up one bottle labeled lorazepam, a heavy-duty sedative. The prescription wasn't in Grandma's name, it was in Valora's. Another bottle, haloperidol, strong antipsychotic, often used to manage extreme behavior. Neither should be anywhere near a woman grandma's age unless prescribed by a physician. And none of them matched the meds listed on the care sheet Valora had taped to the fridge. Lower down, behind a box of bandages, I spotted a slim black folder. Inside were papers marked with the header, Cognitive Decline Assessment, Non-Adjudicated. No doctor's name, no hospital letterhead, but Grandma's name was typed across the top. Below it, a note. To initiate full guardianship transfer, subject must be declared incompetent. Keep sedation consistent. My stomach churned. This wasn't just mismanagement. This wasn't overcautious caregiving. This was premeditated control. They were building a case, fake or otherwise, to take everything from Grandma. And from what I'd seen, they were succeeding. I tucked the folder under my arm, closed the cabinet, and slipped back into my room. I placed everything carefully into my duffel bag, then sat down again. I needed grounding. Opening my side drawer, I pulled out a small tin box where I'd stored mementos. Inside was a necklace, an old, modest gold chain with a tiny locket. Grandma had given it to me the night before I left for my first deployment. I popped it open. Inside, a picture of us. Me, barely 20. Her, strong, proud, holding me like I was still 5 years old. I closed it gently and held it to my chest. The last time I saw her before I left, she had whispered, "You're the only one who listens." And I hadn't, not for years, but I was listening now, and I would make it count. I stood up, stared at the folder one more time, then reached for my phone. My fingers hovered over the record button. This wasn't just about feeling betrayed anymore. This was about proving it. I hit record. "This is March 10th, I began, keeping my voice low. "My name is Diantha K. I'm recording evidence of suspected elder abuse, medication misuse, and legal manipulation involving my grandmother, Ruth Van Blythe, inside her own home." I paused. My hands weren't shaking anymore. My voice had steadied. "Not everything's erased," I whispered into the lens. "Not yet." I didn't sleep that night. After I finished the recording, I sat in the dark at the edge of my bed, back straight, heart strangely still. My body wanted rest, but my mind had other plans. Every conversation, every look, every offhand remark from Valora and Isolde played back in brutal detail. Around 6:30 in the evening the next day, we sat around the dinner table again. Valora had made lemon chicken, but it might as well have been cardboard. Conversation was light, all surface. I barely tasted a bite. Grandma was at the table, propped up in a chair with extra cushions. She said little, but her eyes, when they weren't fogged over, were busy. Watching me. Watching her. Midway through the meal, something shifted. Grandma looked over at me, then toward the hallway, to the right of the table, where the guest rooms were. No words. Just a glance. Calculated, slow. Then her eyes flicked back to Valora, who was explaining why the neighbors next door were too loud for a retired couple. I nodded as if I were listening, but my mind locked onto that glance. Grandma wasn't just drifting tonight. She was trying to tell me something. After dessert, Valora's boxed pie and whipped cream she never whipped, I helped bring the dishes to the sink. I didn't linger for small talk afterward. I excused myself and headed toward the hallway. After checking to make sure Valora and Isolde were still absorbed in whatever they were watching on TV, I stepped into Grandma's bedroom and shut the door softly behind me. The room smelled faintly of rose water and something older, linens that hadn't been moved in months. The closet was ajar. I walked slowly toward it, ran my fingers along the edge of the door, then pushed it open the rest of the way. Inside was neat, far too neat. Blouses hung like museum pieces, shoes aligned with military precision. But tucked into the corner, half hidden behind a fabric storage box, was a small metal safe. It wasn't locked with a key, but a keypad. A 4-digit code. I stared at it, then knelt down, my hands slightly trembling, heart pulsing steadily in my ears. First, I tried Grandma's birthday. The numbers blinked red. Denied. I sat back, confused. Then a thought came, sharp as lightning. I entered my own birthday. The safe clicked open. Inside was a stack of papers, some yellowed with age, others newer. I pulled them out carefully. A manila folder sat on top, labeled House, Original Title. Underneath that were a dozen letters, handwritten, addressed to me. I opened the first one. The handwriting was shaky, but unmistakably hers. My Diantha, if you're reading this, then I couldn't tell you in time. I always trusted you to see past what others pretend not to see. I didn't sign the house over to anyone, no matter what they say. I've said no every time. But they don't stop asking. I swallowed hard. Beneath the letters was a flash drive. I recognized it. One I had sent her years ago to store family photos. There was a sticky note attached to it. For you, play with headphones. I tucked the flash drive in my pocket, folded the letters back into the folder, and sat on the floor, legs crossed, the document splayed before me like a battlefield map. I read 2 more letters, then looked at the house title. My name wasn't on it, but neither was Valora's. Grandma's signature was there, clearly hers, unforged, uncoerced. The original deed still belonged to her. I took out my phone, plugged in the flash drive with an adapter, and opened the only video file on it. The screen lit up. Grandma sat in this very room, propped against her pillows, the lighting dim. Her voice was hushed. They keep asking me to sign, she said, but I won't, not yet, not while I'm still me. She looked off screen for a second. Her hands gripped a piece of paper I couldn't see. If anything happens, and they say I agreed, it's a lie. I never gave them this house. I never gave them permission. I never gave them my trust. The video ended. No drama, just a tired old woman refusing to be erased. I closed my eyes, breathing through a deep, silent rage. It was one thing to suspect, to wonder, to question, but this was confirmation. The bruises, the blocked emails, the sedatives, the forced silence, it was all a strategy. And I had the playbook in my hands now. A memory tugged at me. The night I arrived, when Grandma had whispered, "If you see her take the papers, don't be quiet." That wasn't confusion. That wasn't dementia. That was a woman screaming inside the only way she could. I gathered everything and slid it into my backpack. The house was quiet when I opened the door to leave her room. TV still on, the volume low. I walked carefully, every floorboard memorized, every creak avoided. Back in my room, I locked the door behind me and sat at my desk. They thought I wouldn't figure it out. They thought they'd buried the truth so deep it would never surface. They thought I was still that girl who used to cry in the laundry room when Valora snapped at me for leaving toothpaste in the sink. They were wrong. I unzipped the backpack and took out the flash drive, placed it in a different hiding spot. Then I took a photo of the house title, the letters, the sticky note. I sent it all to a secure drive. Then I backed it up to another. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Because this wasn't just about reclaiming Grandma's rights. This was about reclaiming mine, too. They'd written me out of the narrative, but I wasn't done writing. As I folded the letters, my phone buzzed. A text from Isolde. "Don't be up late. We have visitors tomorrow." I stared at it for a second, then typed back. Of course. Wouldn't want to miss the performance. I turned the phone face down. As I reached for the documents one last time to tuck them safely away, I heard a soft chime from the video file still open on my laptop. Grandma's voice echoed, low and steady. "Only you can stop them." I didn't sleep the night after I found the safe. Instead, I laid awake replaying Grandma's words from the video, her voice trembling but steady. "Only you can stop them." I listened to that line more times than I could count. By the time the sun peeked through the curtains the next morning, something inside me had clicked into place. There would be no more silence. I got up, brushed my teeth, pulled on a worn t-shirt, and sat at my desk with a plan forming. First, I made 2 copies of everything: the video, the letters, the property deed. I uploaded one to an encrypted drive and saved the other to a flash drive I slipped into the sole of my boot. I kept a 3rd copy on a separate card tucked inside the lining of my wallet. Redundancy wasn't paranoia, not anymore. By late morning, the house was buzzing. Valora was prepping for another one of her Sunday socials, a brunch she threw twice a month to keep up appearances with the neighbors. She always served deviled eggs and smiled just a little too wide when people complimented the house. Around 11 o'clock, I slipped outside to the backyard. I found Isolde standing near the rose bushes in her yoga pants and a lightweight fleece, snipping away dead blooms with the kind of precision that made your skin crawl. Her movements were slow, deliberate, too controlled. She didn't look surprised to see me approach. "I know everything," I said, keeping my voice even. "You should stop now before it gets worse." She didn't flinch, just kept trimming. "Dramatic, even for you," she said, dropping a clipped stem into a plastic bucket. "I've got copies," I added. "Videos, letters, the original deed. I'm not asking for a confrontation. I'm giving you a chance." She turned then, finally looked at me. "You were gone too long, Diantha," she said, her voice ice cold. "This isn't your home anymore. You gave that up the day you packed your bags and disappeared." "I left to serve this country," she sneered. "You left Grandma. We were the ones taking care of her. You're not swooping in now to play hero." "You call drugging her and trying to steal her house care?" Her jaw clenched. For the first time, something behind her eyes shifted. Uncertainty, maybe, or fear, but it vanished in a flash. "If you make this a war," she said, stepping closer, "Grandma won't survive it. Is that what you want? To stress her until she slips further? Don't make her collateral damage." I stood still. My fists stayed at my sides. I could feel my nails digging into my palms, but I didn't move. "You really think I'll back down because you threaten her?" I said. "You don't know me." "I know you want to feel like the good one," she replied, voice syrupy. "But you're reckless. You always were." "You think fighting will make up for all those years away?" Her words didn't land the way she hoped. I had armor now, real armor, built from guilt and clarity and everything I had uncovered. I didn't say anything else. I just walked back inside, past Valora, arranging a fruit platter in the kitchen. She didn't look up, but I saw the tension in her shoulders. In my room, I pulled out the flash drive and slid it into the laptop. I opened the video of Grandma again, this time not as a granddaughter seeking comfort, but as a witness reviewing evidence. Her voice filled the room. "If I ever forget, please remember, I never said yes. This is our home, yours too." I paused the video and stared at the screen. This wasn't sentiment. This was a statement. Legal or not, it was power. I opened a new email, typed the address of an old friend, Marie, a military contact who had moved into law after discharge. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but she once told me, "If you ever need to take something up the chain and don't want it getting lost in politics, come to me." I attached the video, the scanned deed, and a short message. "Marie, this is a family matter, but it's become dangerous. I need advice, and maybe backup. Diantha." I hit send. Then I opened a second email, to Alma. I didn't say much, just, "I know more now. I have proof. Please don't throw away that camera footage." I pressed send again and closed the laptop. The rest of the day moved like smoke. The brunch was loud, like always, laughter in every corner, the hum of a curated life. Valora turned it on for the crowd like flipping a switch. Isolde followed suit, holding champagne flutes, smiling like she hadn't just threatened me with emotional blackmail. I kept quiet, watched, listened. That night, after the guests left and the dishwasher hummed behind me, I crossed paths with Isolde in the hallway. She was holding a book, maybe a prop, maybe not. She stopped when I passed. She looked me up and down like she used to when we were teenagers, and she wanted to remind me she'd always be ahead. "You're wasting your time," she said softly. "They'll never believe you." "You have no power here." I leaned closer, lowered my voice just enough to sound calm, but not small. "If you think I'll back down again," I whispered, "you never knew me." Then I walked past her, steady steps, head high. I walked straight past her. My voice still echoed in the hallway, firm, unshaken, louder than any scream I could have managed. I didn't need volume, I had proof. And now, I had momentum. The next morning, before the sun fully stretched across the porch, I grabbed my jacket and left through the side gate. Valora and Isolde were still asleep, or pretending to be. I didn't care either way. I needed to see someone who wouldn't smile through a lie. Alma answered the door with a wary look, clutching her housecoat tight against her chest. "That bad?" she asked, before I even said a word. I nodded. "Worse." She stepped aside, letting me in without a question. Her living room was simple: wood floors, faded rug, walls covered in framed memories. Alma didn't talk much, but her silence was the kind that made room for truth. "I know you've got a camera facing our back fence," I said, sitting down on her floral couch. "You ever see anything strange?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to a small wooden cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a small USB drive. She turned, held it in her palm like it weighed more than it should. "I've seen too much," she said softly. "I thought you should have this." When I got back home, I didn't even take off my shoes. I climbed the stairs 2 at a time, locked my bedroom door behind me, and plugged the drive into my laptop. There she was, Grandma. On the back porch, clearly upset, clearly confused, trying to get up from her chair. Valora stood over her, yelling something about how she never helps with anything and how she's lucky we let you live here at all. Then, without hesitation, Valora slapped her. Hard. Grandma recoiled like she'd been hit before. I covered my mouth. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago. Clear, unedited, indefensible. The kind of footage that would rattle anyone with a conscience. That's when the idea hit me. Let them play polite hosts. Let them decorate the table with fake smiles and tartlets. I'd bring the truth as the centerpiece. That afternoon, the brunch started like every other. The table was set with silverware that hadn't seen the light of day since Thanksgiving, and the smell of quiche and maple-glazed ham filled the house like a warm lie. Valora was in her element, greeting neighbors with perfectly timed jokes and complimenting their shoes like nothing was amiss. Isolde stood near the hallway, dressed in soft pink and pearls, laughing with a guest about her unofficial caretaker title, like it was some saintly cross she bore. I sat at the far end of the table, watching everything, every smirk, every wink, every passive-aggressive comment veiled in sweetness. Valora cleared her throat. "Before we dig in, I just want to say how grateful I am for all of you, family, friends. It's hard taking care of someone who doesn't even remember who you are half the time, but we do it because we love her." A few people murmured, "Amen," and "Bless your heart." I stood up. She froze, mid-toast. "I think there's something y'all should see." The room went still. Forks paused mid-air. Chewing slowed. Isolde's smile tightened into something less rehearsed. I reached for the remote and turned on the smart TV. My laptop mirrored the screen instantly. I hit play. No intro, no explanation. Just Valora, on screen, her face twisted in fury as she slapped our grandmother. Gasps filled the air. Someone dropped their glass. Valora's real voice, not the hostess version, thundered through the speakers. "You're useless! Why are you still here?" When the video ended, I turned it off. Silence. Then chaos. "That's taken out of context," Valora snapped, her voice high-pitched and cracking. "You have no idea what she was saying to me that day." "Nothing screams context like a slap to an 87-year-old's face," I said. A neighbor stood up. "Valora, is that real?" Isolde stepped in, desperate. "She's editing things. She's twisting this. Diantha's always been dramatic. She's angry she missed out on the will," Valora added quickly. "She's trying to make us look bad. She's twisting everything." "I haven't asked for a dime," I replied. "Not once. But I'll tell you what I will ask for now. Accountability." Valora's face turned red. She reached for the remote, but I caught it first and slid it into my pocket. "You need to leave," she hissed, barely holding her composure. I shook my head. "It's not your house," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "And I'm not going anywhere." No one said anything. The air was so thick with tension you could have carved it. People began standing. A few guests mumbled excuses and made their way to the door, eyes averted. The ones who stayed were the quiet kind, the ones who didn't speak until they were sure which side was safe. I didn't need them to speak. They'd seen it, and they wouldn't forget it. As the last guest stepped outside, Valora turned to me. "You think this proves something?" she spat. "You think this makes you better than us?" "No," I said, "but it makes you visible." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. I walked past her, back toward Grandma's room. She was sitting by the window, staring at the oak tree out front. I didn't say anything, just sat beside her and took her hand. Her skin was cool, but her grip was firmer than usual. "Loud in there," she said, voice thin but steady. I smiled. Not anymore. I didn't give her the satisfaction of turning around. I walked back into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood by the window like nothing had happened. But inside, my nerves were on fire. The next morning came with paperwork, delivered, of course, with a knock on the front door. I opened it, expecting the mailman. Instead, a young woman in slacks and a blazer handed me an envelope without a word and walked away. She didn't have to speak. The gold seal on the outside told me everything. I opened it at the dining table with Valora sitting 10 feet away, pretending to scroll through her phone. She didn't look up when I pulled out the first page. "Notice of trespassing," I read aloud. "Issued by private counsel, declaring me an unlawful occupant." Valora didn't blink. "You're not on the lease. Legally, we had to protect the household." I looked up at her, jaw locked. "You mean protect your little castle of lies?" She smiled, serene as a pastor at a Sunday picnic. "If you have concerns, you can always speak with our attorney." There was another document in the envelope, one I hadn't seen before. It was a notarized declaration, allegedly signed by Grandma, transferring full medical and financial power of attorney to Isolde. It claimed that I had voluntarily relinquished familial responsibility by way of extended absence, and that re-establishing presence may cause unnecessary emotional strain. I reread that last sentence 3 times. They were framing me as a threat. "You forged this," I said, not asking. Valora stood up slowly, walked to the sink, and rinsed out her mug. "Prove it." And so I would. I took photos of the document, front and back, and sent them to a friend, Will, who now worked as a document examiner for a legal firm in Austin. We hadn't spoken in years, but he owed me a favor, and I wasn't shy about calling it in. That afternoon, I headed to Alma's again. She greeted me with the same look she always wore, equal parts sympathy and strength. "I have one more thing," she said, leading me to her small office off the living room. She opened a folder and handed me a printed still from her surveillance footage. The image showed Valora at the side door one night with a man in scrubs, wheeling a black briefcase. "Who's this?" I asked. "He didn't come from any ambulance," Alma said. "No one else was sick. I checked. That same night, your grandma didn't get out of bed for 2 days." I took the still, turned it over in my hands. I knew that man. "His name's Joel Carter," I said slowly. "He's not a doctor. He's a mobile notary." Back home, I pulled up a Google search and confirmed it. Joel Carter had a Yelp page full of glowing reviews for quick home signing services, nothing remotely connected to medicine, no license number, no medical affiliation. I added his name to my growing list of evidence. The next morning, I drove to the regional hospital, alone, early enough that Valora and Isolde were still at the house nursing their schemes. I asked for records. They weren't allowed to give me much, but I had enough family linkage on file to access the visitation logs. I requested a narrow window, one specific evening that Alma's footage had shown. The nurse printed the log. Grandma had been admitted for a fall, placed under sedation that night. She was administered lorazepam at 6:42 p.m. Joel Carter signed in at 7:13. They had brought in a notary to witness a signature from a heavily medicated woman. I stood in the parking lot, gripping the paper like it could burn through my fingers. I called Will, who confirmed my suspicion. That's enough to discredit the document's validity. It wasn't just unethical, it's legally void. "Can you write that up?" I asked. "You'll have it in 2 hours." I didn't go home. Not yet. Instead, I drove straight to the office of a local elder law attorney, Monica Stetson, who had served in the National Guard and now focused on elderly rights and estate fraud. I showed her everything: videos, stills, logs, the forged POA. Her eyes narrowed as she clicked through my files. "This isn't just a family spat," she said. "This is abuse, coercion, and civil fraud. You've done your homework, Ms. K. I'll file a report with Adult Protective Services immediately, but we're not stopping there." I nodded. She continued, "We'll prepare an affidavit, move for emergency guardianship transfer, and request a formal inquiry. But you need to know, this will get uglier before it gets better." "I'm not looking for comfort," I told her. "I'm looking for accountability." It took us 2 hours to get the papers drafted. By then, Will had emailed me a notarized statement verifying the signature inconsistencies. Before I left Monica's office, I signed my own affidavit, my hands steady, my voice unwavering. As I stepped into the parking lot, the wind picked up. My phone buzzed. A text from Isolde. "You really want this to go nuclear?" I stared at the screen, then typed back, "It already did." By Monday morning, the paperwork was filed. Monica had everything in order: affidavits, medical reports, video evidence, and the notarized statement from Will, confirming what I already knew deep in my bones. It wasn't just a family feud anymore. It was a legal battle, and we were done playing nice. 1 week later, the courthouse hallway smelled like floor polish and old sweat. I sat outside the small courtroom, hands folded in my lap, watching Valora and Isolde whisper with their attorney a few feet away. They were dressed like they were headed to a charity luncheon, pastels, pearls, and the same sugar-sweet smiles they wore to every brunch, but their eyes never met mine. They knew. And for the first time in weeks, I felt taller than both of them. When the bailiff called us in, the room was quiet, sterile. A modest wood-paneled courtroom with a single judge, no jury, and a scattering of curious observers from the elder care community. Monica walked in beside me, calm and collected, her bag neatly zipped and her posture flawless. Valora looked over at the judge and smiled with a rehearsed warmth. "Your Honor, I'd like to begin by stating that this has been a misunderstanding. Families often miscommunicate." The judge nodded slowly. "We'll hear both sides, but we're starting with the petitioner." Monica stood, firm and direct. "We are here to present evidence of coerced legal manipulation, elder abuse, and fraudulent transfer of power of attorney. The documentation includes video footage, hospital records, and eyewitness testimony." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Eyewitness?" "Yes," Monica said. "Ruthven Blythe will testify." There was a pause. Valora flinched. The judge nodded toward the side door. "Bring her in." The courtroom door opened, and 2 aides wheeled in Grandma. Her face looked tired, pale, but focused. Her eyes scanned the room slowly, then locked onto mine. She blinked, and I could swear her shoulders straightened just slightly. The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Blythe, do you recall signing over power of attorney to your daughter?" Grandma didn't answer right away. She shifted slowly, then looked at Valora, then at Isolde, then at me. "No," she said. "I didn't sign anything. I said no." A murmur rippled through the room. "I told them no," she repeated, her voice cracking, but louder this time. "They gave me something to drink, then said, 'Just sign here, Mom.' But I didn't." Valora stood suddenly. Your Honor, she's confused. She's been sedated for weeks." The judge raised a hand. "You'll have your turn." Grandma gripped the sides of the chair. "I didn't give them my house. I didn't give them my trust. And I sure didn't give them permission to lie for me." The courtroom went still. Even the clerk stopped typing. The judge sat back. "Noted. We'll enter her statement into the record. Let's proceed." Monica presented the video of Joel Carter arriving under the guise of medical care. The timestamp, the hospital sedation logs, and Will's document analysis all aligned. Every piece lined up like dominoes, tipped one by one. They had no footing to stand on anymore. Valora looked like she was about to speak again, but Isolde placed a hand on her arm. "Don't," I heard her whisper. Her face had gone white, her eyes glued to the floor. By the end of the hearing, the judge ordered immediate temporary guardianship of Grandma to be transferred to me. Valora and Isolde were barred from contact until the investigation concluded. He also initiated an emergency inquiry into elder abuse and document fraud. After the session, a few reporters who had caught wind of the story hovered near the steps outside. I shielded Grandma's face with my coat as we walked through the crowd. Miss K, did you plan to go public with the video? What will happen if your mother's found guilty? Are there others involved? I didn't stop. I didn't speak, but I held Grandma's hand tighter. That evening, a small local news station aired a segment. The anchor read from a teleprompter with detached concern while images of Valora and Isolde flashed on screen. Wichita Falls woman accused of elder abuse by her own daughter, a former military officer, after damning footage surfaces. The story picked up steam. Calls started pouring into APS. Apparently, other families had been silent about similar in-home care setups gone wrong. We weren't the only ones, just the first to go loud. Valora's little circle began to crumble. No more brunch invitations, no more garden club texts. Her Facebook disappeared. Isolde's social media went dark overnight. But none of that mattered. What mattered was Grandma, safe, seen, and finally heard. We returned home late that night. Alma was waiting at the porch, a cup of chamomile tea in each hand. You did it, she said, handing me one. Told you they were the wrong kind of quiet. I nodded. It's not over yet, but it's begun. We sat on the porch, the wind gently brushing against the old wooden siding. Inside, Grandma settled into her chair by the window. For the first time in months, she didn't ask where she was. She just looked at the stars. The heat of July rolled over us like a slow wave, heavy and thick, the moment our feet hit the sun-baked concrete outside the courthouse. It clung to the back of my neck and made the fabric of my shirt stick to my spine, but I didn't care. Neither did Grandma. For the first time in what felt like forever, we weren't stepping into another storm. We were walking out of one. It had taken 3 long months to get to that point. 3 months of hearings, paperwork, whispered conversations behind closed doors, and too many nights when sleep was a stranger. But we made it. We were still standing. The house we returned to wasn't the same one we'd left behind. It used to be a place where the walls listened but never spoke, where shadows lingered longer than they should have. Now it was breathing again. And so were we. The verdict wasn't swift, but it was solid, like a door finally slamming shut on a chapter that had overstayed its welcome. Valora was sentenced to 6 years in state prison. Elder abuse, document forgery, fraud. The judge's voice was cool and unwavering when she read the charges aloud, but each word hit like thunder. Isolde, in her tailored suit and downcast eyes, took a plea deal. 3 years probation, mandatory counseling, and a forced public apology. It aired once during the 7:00 p.m. local news, just once. After that, it vanished into the static like the last trace of her false dignity. Neither of them was allowed within 50 yards of Grandma again. That wasn't just a court order, that was peace made manifest. The day after Valora's sentencing, I moved in for good. No big moment, no ceremonial unlocking of the door. I just carried my worn duffel bag inside, walked up the stairs to the room that used to be mine, and unpacked it for the last time. The walls were still that dull beige, and the faint scent of lavender lingered, left over from one of Isolde's overpriced candles. It felt like a whisper of the past, but I didn't let it linger. I painted the walls myself. A soft green, the kind Grandma always said reminded her of early spring mornings, the kind that promises something new. The garden had been nearly choked to death by neglect, but it wasn't gone. Little by little, Grandma and I brought it back. It started with pulling weeds, then turning the soil, then planting again. One slow afternoon at a time, the hydrangeas came back. The tomatoes started budding. The marigolds peeked out like tiny suns. Grandma still needed help with the porch steps. Her knees weren't what they used to be. But she remembered every plant, every root. Her hands, though a little shakier now, still knew how to cradle the dirt and nestle each flower in with care. She smiled more than she used to, sometimes only slightly, sometimes fully, but always real. Most mornings, I'd find her in the kitchen before me, standing in the same spot she always had, clutching her favorite chipped mug, the one with the faded bluebirds on it. Some days she'd ask what day it was. Other days, she'd beat me to it and tell me a story from when I was 5, her eyes dancing like I hadn't already heard it 20 times before. But she always remembered my name, every time. That never changed. In the small compartment of my wallet, folded neatly, is a photocopy of the letter she left me in the safe. One I didn't even know existed until the lawyer opened it. I read it often, sometimes before breakfast, sometimes late at night when the house is quiet and the only sound is the ticking of the old clock on the hallway wall. "You're the only one who listens," she wrote. That one line alone has carried me through more dark days than I care to count. It reminded me why I came back, why I stayed, why I didn't walk away when it got hard. Now, I keep a journal. It's nothing special, just a cheap, spiral-bound notebook with a tear in the front cover. I write in it every other day. Sometimes I document things like court dates, the awkward interviews with Adult Protective Services, or the meetings with Monica, Grandma's new caseworker. Other times, I just scribble thoughts about how the basil in the garden is growing, or how Grandma insists on calling Alma Miss Shore, like she's still a guest instead of a neighbor who practically lives next door. Sundays have become our tradition. That's when Alma comes over for tea. We sit on the porch in creaky chairs with chipped paint and drink from mismatched mugs that never seem to hold the same amount. We talk about everything but the past, on purpose. She still wears her floral housecoat like a badge of honor and speaks with a soft lilt that carries just enough steel underneath to remind you she's not one to mess with. She's the kind of person every small town swears they have, but only the luckiest actually do. The house feels different now. It's not just cleaner or quieter. It feels open, like it's finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. It doesn't flinch when someone walks in. It doesn't brace for impact when a voice rises. It doesn't echo with tension anymore. It feels lived in, not endured. Alive. One particularly sunny afternoon, I decided to repaint the front door. I chose a deep, calming blue, not because it was symbolic, though I suppose it was, but because I'd always wanted to. After it dried, I hung a small wind chime from the awning. It's nothing fancy, just a few polished pieces of metal and colored glass. But when the breeze catches it just right, it sings the kind of tune that makes you pause, take a breath, and remember you're okay. That evening, Grandma and I sat out back, sipping sweet tea and eating slices of watermelon off paper towels. The sun dipped below the trees in a haze of gold and soft rose. It was quiet, but not empty. "Do you regret coming back?" she asked suddenly, her voice gravelly with age, but still solid as bedrock. I looked over at her, the woman who held my hand through every scraped knee when I was little, and then again through a legal battle that could have broken anyone else. "Only that I didn't come back sooner," I said. She nodded slowly, as if she already knew my answer before she asked. Later that night, after I helped her into bed and made sure her reading lamp was on, I returned to my desk. I flipped open my journal to a blank page, wrote the date, and stared at it for a while. Then I wrote a single line. "Some wounds don't need to be forgotten. They just need somewhere safe to heal." Outside, the wind chime tapped gently in the dark, like it was agreeing with me. Sometimes, the deepest scars aren't visible on the skin. They're etched in silence, in betrayal, and in the places we once called home. This story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming voice, honoring truth, and protecting the people we love when no one else will. Have you ever uncovered something your family tried to hide? What would you do if your silence kept someone else in harm's way? If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. More powerful stories like this are coming soon.